Have you ever found yourself sitting in a crowded coffee shop, scrolling through thousands of notifications on your phone, yet feeling a strange, profound emptiness inside? We are living in a bizarre era where a single tap can connect us with someone halfway across the globe, but we struggle to find anyone to call when life throws us a curveball. Social media provides us with thousands of followers, but our real life is shrinking into an isolated island. The truth is, we do not lack the tools for connection. What we truly lack is the capacity to cultivate genuine, real-world relationships. Welcome back to Everyday Better You, the place where we dissect the hidden corners of modern life with absolute clarity and find practical solutions to become 1% better every day. Today, we are not going to talk about superficial networking advice. Instead, we will look directly at a painful reality eating away at the minds of millions of adults worldwide: the loneliness epidemic and how to rebuild our capacity for deep connection. Are you ready to name this pain, break down the common misconceptions, and discover the path to step out of your own isolation? Relax your mind, keep a cool head but an open heart, and let us begin our journey today. Part 1. The alarming reality of the loneliness epidemic. To truly understand the weight of our current social condition, we must first confront a harsh truth that is quietly unfolding across modern society. It is an issue so severe that the United States Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, issued a formal advisory to the public, warning that widespread isolation carries a health risk equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. When addressing this growing global crisis, he highlighted a deep societal paradox by stating, "We are more connected than ever, yet we feel completely alone." This means that while our technology links us across continents instantaneously, our inner psychological world remains entirely isolated from meaningful human contact. This specific paradox forms the defining emotional struggle of our era. On any given day, we can unlock our digital devices and watch hundreds of likes, views, and superficial reactions accumulate on our curated profiles. Yet, the second the screen goes dark, that fragile sense of validation evaporates into thin air, leaving behind a cold, heavy layer of emotional abandonment. A massive error many individuals make is confusing the state of being physically alone with the psychological state of loneliness. True, loneliness is not merely the absence of people around you. It is the agonizing sensation of being completely invisible while standing directly in the middle of a bustling crowd. We have systematically replaced the organic warmth of the human voice with sanitized text messages, automated comments, and plastic emojis, completely ignoring the fact that our biological architecture evolved over millions of years to thrive on physical presence, prolonged eye contact, and shared physical spaces. The true danger of this epidemic lies in how seamlessly we have normalized this profound lack of connection. We build logical stories in our minds to justify our isolation, telling ourselves that we are simply too busy building our careers, that everyone else is equally preoccupied with their own lives, or that our digital interactions are perfectly sufficient to sustain our emotional health. This is a highly dangerous delusion. When we closely analyze the skyrocketing rates of anxiety, chronic stress, and deep-seated dissatisfaction among working professionals globally, the single golden thread that ties all these conditions together is a total absence of genuine communal belonging. We are emotionally starving for depth while simultaneously drowning in a sea of endless digital white noise. If we sincerely desire to break free from this paralyzing psychological epidemic, we must courageously stop pretending that this lifestyle is sustainable and admit that our current social structures are fundamentally broken. To alter this self-destructive trajectory, we must realize that conquering modern loneliness does not require us to transform our personalities or become loud, extroverted socialites over the course of a single weekend. The path toward genuine healing is always built on a series of tiny, highly deliberate behavioral shifts. By making a conscious decision to prioritize emotional quality over digital quantity and human depth over surface-level distraction, we can slowly begin the process of reconstructing our social health. Embracing the core philosophy of becoming 1% better every day means waking up to the reality that an accomplished, meaningful human life cannot be achieved in a vacuum of total isolation. It requires us to cultivate the internal strength needed to actively bridge the painful gap between our private worlds and the surrounding community. Part 2. Understanding relational fitness. We frequently live under the false assumption that forming deep, enduring friendships is an effortless, natural process that should happen automatically without any conscious intervention on our part. We look back at our childhood years and remember how simple it was to find a companion, mistakenly believing that the same mechanics should apply to our adult lives. However, once we enter the complex world of professional responsibilities and independent living, building and maintaining meaningful relationships becomes a distinct psychological and behavioral skill that requires deliberate, structured practice. It does not happen by accident. To understand this social dynamic with absolute clarity, we can examine a highly effective conceptual framework introduced by the renowned relationship expert Esther Perel. When discussing the gradual decay of modern social networks, she utilized a specific, powerful analogy to describe the situation. Just like going to the gym, relationships require intentional practice to stay healthy. This profound insight reveals that our emotional connections behave exactly like physical muscles. If we neglect them, allow them to sit dormant, or refuse to challenge them, they will inevitably atrophy over time. During the earlier chapters of our lives, structural proximity did all the heavy lifting for us. Educational institutions, university dormitories, and organized extracurricular activities naturally forced us into environments where deep friendships could bloom easily because we shared the same spaces, the same schedules, and the same daily struggles. We did not need an organized strategy to stay connected because our lives were systematically intertwined by default. But the exact moment we step into the corporate arena and assume the crushing weight of adult obligations, that supportive automatic structure completely vanishes. We suddenly find our mental bandwidth entirely consumed by relentless professional deadlines, complex financial duties, household chores, and the exhausting pursuit of career advancement. In this high-pressure environment, if we do not actively and aggressively carve out dedicated time for our social health, it will automatically get pushed to the absolute bottom of our daily priority list. We would never be foolish enough to expect our bodies to stay physically fit and muscular without regular weight training and cardiovascular exercise. Yet we consistently expect our friendships to remain vibrant, deep, and resilient without investing a single ounce of conscious mental energy or focused time into them. The single greatest mistake people make in modern society is treating human relationships as an optional luxury rather than an absolute biological necessity. We fall into the cognitive trap of viewing social gatherings, deep phone calls, and communal activities as things we are only allowed to do when all our primary work is completely finished or when we happen to have a rare pocket of spare time. But since the demanding nature of modern work ensures that the to-do list is never truly completed, our vital human relationships are always the very first things we choose to sacrifice on the altar of productivity. This chronic neglect steadily weakens our internal social capacity, making subsequent human interactions feel incredibly awkward, emotionally exhausting, and fundamentally burdensome. We begin to feel a deep sense of friction whenever we think about reaching out to someone, and we find ourselves withdrawing even further into our private shells simply because we have lost the vital daily habit of connecting with another human being. Many people misinterpret this exhaustion as a sign that they are naturally introverted or that they prefer total isolation, failing to realize that their social muscles have simply grown incredibly weak from absolute disuse. To build true relational fitness, we must consciously elevate it to the exact same level of discipline and importance that we apply to our financial careers or our physical health routines. It demands a highly structured, intentional strategy. This means you must stop leaving your social life up to chance or spontaneous desire. It requires you to proactively reach out to people in your network, rigidly establish clear boundaries with your employment to protect your personal hours, and consistently show up for your friends even when your emotional energy feels low or when it is physically inconvenient to do so. It is about deeply understanding that a strong, supportive social circle is not a distraction from a successful life, but rather the ultimate protective shield for your long-term psychological well-being. By committing to tiny, daily, deliberate investments in your human connections, you gradually fortify your emotional core, rebuild your social stamina, and design a life that is firmly rooted in mutual respect, shared vulnerability, and genuine communal strength. Part 3. The trap of hyper-independence. In the modern self-help landscape and the dominant culture of intense personal achievement, we are constantly bombarded with messages that loudly celebrate the myth of the completely self-made individual. We praise the lone wolf who claims they do not need anyone else to reach the pinnacle of success, and we mistakenly equate the act of needing others with emotional dependency or psychological weakness. However, a deeper, more clinical evaluation of human behavior reveals a much darker reality hidden beneath this popular lifestyle choice. Psychologists and mental health experts frequently point out that this fierce, absolute refusal to rely on anyone else is rarely a sign of genuine mental fortitude or authentic inner peace. When examining the root causes of this behavioral pattern, they often use a highly direct, sobering phrase to describe the underlying condition. Hyperindependence is a trauma response, not a strength. This means that an extreme, unyielding commitment to total self-reliance is almost always a subconscious psychological shield built to conceal a profound, lingering fear of rejection, betrayal, or emotional abandonment. When an individual goes through severe past betrayals, conditional love from caregivers, or painful childhood neglect, they almost always internalize a dangerous, protective lesson about how the world works. They tell themselves that the only person who will ever truly look out for their well-being is the person they see in the mirror. To shield their hearts from the possibility of experiencing that devastating emotional pain ever again, they systematically construct massive, impenetrable psychological walls around their inner lives and proudly label this state of isolation as high-level independence. They flatly refuse to ask for assistance even when they are visibly drowning under an unmanageable workload at the office. They deliberately withhold their true emotional needs from their romantic partners, and they instinctively push people away the exact moment an interaction begins to feel intimate, ensuring no one can ever get close enough to catch them off guard or inflict emotional damage. Vainly, they live under the delusion that by entirely eliminating human dependency from their lives, they have successfully eliminated human suffering. The tragic irony of hyperindependence is that it inevitably forces a person into a deeply lonely, exhausting existence that breaks down their resilience over time. By rigidly refusing to let anyone support you, provide you with comfort, or share your daily burdens, you also effectively prevent anyone from truly knowing, understanding, or loving the real you. You slowly become the incredibly reliable, highly capable friend who is always expected to fix everyone else's problems, but you possess absolutely no one to hold your hand or soothe your mind when your own private world falls apart. This profound imbalance creates a deep-seated, chronic resentment toward the world and a crushing sense of psychological isolation that wealth or professional accolades can never fix. You find yourself completely surrounded by acquaintances who deeply admire your superficial strength, yet you feel entirely invisible because you never allow your authentic vulnerabilities to see the light of day. Dismantling this deeply ingrained behavioral trap requires a massive intellectual and emotional shift in how we define human maturity. We must consciously realize that healthy, balanced interdependence is the true hallmark of a highly developed human being, not absolute, cold isolation. Human beings are fundamentally wired as cooperative creatures. Our nervous systems are biologically designed to co-regulate with one another in moments of distress. Asking for help or expressing an emotional need is not a shameful confession of incompetence or weakness. It is an act of profound, radical courage because it proves that you possess the internal security required to trust another person with your limitations. By making a conscious decision to lower your guard, step out of the lone wolf delusion, and allow others to lift you up during your darkest hours, you effectively shatter the walls of your self-imposed prison and finally open the door to genuine companionship, mutual growth, and authentic belonging. Part 4. Social connections versus deep connections. It is a remarkably common phenomenon in modern urban environments to see individuals who possess fully packed social calendars, yet go home every single night to face a mountain of profound, suffocating loneliness. They spend their weeks attending high-profile networking events, going out for drinks with colleagues, and participating in non-stop group chats across multiple messaging applications, yet they feel completely detached from the human being standing right next to them. This painful mismatch occurs because modern society has conditioned us to confuse superficial social activity with genuine emotional connection. To bridge this gap and understand why our high levels of interaction are failing to fulfill us, we must look closely at the underlying mechanics of human intimacy. A fundamental, inescapable truth about human bonding highlights this dynamic with absolute clarity. True connection only happens when we dare to show our real, vulnerable selves. This emphasizes that intimacy cannot exist in a vacuum of perfection. It demands the willingness to take off our social masks. The vast majority of our daily human interactions happen at an incredibly shallow, performative level. We ask our colleagues how they are doing as a mindless greeting, but we do not actually possess the emotional bandwidth or the genuine desire to hear the truth. We simply want them to say they are fine so we can move on with our scripts. We spend our energy talking about the weather, corporate politics, or internet trends, keeping our thoughts safely contained within a harmless, surface-level boundary. While this type of sanitized communication successfully protects us from the discomfort of being judged, it also ensures that our relationships remain completely empty and hollow. You can never feel truly valued, loved, or known if you only allow the world to interact with a highly curated, flawless, and artificial version of your life. The primary obstacle that prevents us from diving deeper into our relationships is an intense, paralyzing fear of negative judgment or social rejection. We worry that if we share our authentic struggles, our financial anxieties, or our deep relationship doubts, people will immediately think less of us or view us as incapable. Consequently, we choose to keep our conversations intentionally light, safe, and performative. We laugh at jokes that we do not find remotely funny and agree with opinions that we fundamentally disagree with, all to maintain an artificial illusion of social harmony. But this superficial harmony is an incredibly poor substitute for authentic human belonging. It leaves us feeling like exhausted actors performing on a public stage, entirely disconnected from the audience that is watching us. To successfully transition from a state of social acquaintance to a state of deep, nourishing connection, we must intentionally introduce vulnerability into our daily conversations. This does not mean trauma dumping your deepest psychological secrets onto a complete stranger during a casual first meeting. Rather, it means gradually sharing your authentic thoughts, admitting when you are having a difficult week, and asking meaningful, open-ended questions that invite the other person to drop their defenses as well. When you possess the rare courage to show your human flaws and limitations, you create an immediate psychological safe space for others to drop their heavy armor as well. That shared space of mutual vulnerability is the exact foundation upon which unbreakable, lifelong human bonds are constructed. Part 5, the 1% consistency rule for adult friendships. As we progress further through the demanding landscape of adulthood, the sheer logistics of modern life become the ultimate executioner of our closest friendships. Between managing highly competitive careers, nurturing long-term romantic partnerships, handling sudden family obligations, and dealing with endless personal administrative chores, finding a continuous block of several hours to hang out with friends becomes an absolute rarity. Many people simply give up entirely, assuming that if they cannot manage long, deep weekends or elaborate dinner gatherings, they cannot maintain their friendships at all. To counter this defeatist attitude, we can look directly to the wisdom of behavioral science, particularly the principles of habit formation popularized by James Clear. A crucial liberating rule for sustaining long-term adult bonds offers a highly practical alternative to our all-or-nothing mindset. You don't need hours to maintain a friendship, you just need consistency. This means that regular, micro-investments of attention are infinitely more valuable than sporadic, grand gestures. The primary reason adult friendships fade away is rarely due to a sudden, dramatic argument or a catastrophic betrayal. Instead, it is almost always caused by a slow, quiet drift. We promise ourselves that we will call an old friend next week, but next week quickly turns into next month, and next month quietly evaporates into a full year of total silence. The emotional gap widens naturally until reaching out feels incredibly awkward, and the relationship eventually dissolves without either person noticing. We mistakenly believe we need a perfect weekend trip or a long, uninterrupted evening to catch up. And because we can never find time for those large events within our chaotic schedules, we choose to do nothing at all. This cognitive error turns friendship into an exhausting obligation rather than a source of genuine emotional support. This is exactly where the core philosophy of Everyday Better. You can completely revolutionize our social circles. We need to completely decouple the concept of friendship from the rigid requirement of massive time investments. A deep, meaningful bond can be kept alive, thriving, and highly resilient through tiny, consistent actions that take less than a minute of our day. It can be a random text message, sharing an inside joke from your college days, a brief voice note checking in on a major career project they mentioned weeks ago, or a quick 5-minute phone call while you are walking from your office to the train station. These small touch points serve as a constant psychological reminder that the other person is valued, remembered, and actively kept in your thoughts. When you choose to apply the 1% rule to your social life, you completely remove the heavy logistical friction of scheduling. You stop waiting for the perfect, empty weekend and start utilizing the small, overlooked pockets of time that already exist within your daily routine. Consistency builds a profound psychological safety net between friends. It establishes an unspoken, unbreakable understanding that no matter how chaotic or overwhelming life gets, the underlying connection remains completely intact. By committing to these tiny daily habits of proactive outreach, you ensure that your closest relationships do not become accidental casualties of a busy life, allowing them to grow stronger, deeper, and more reliable year after year. Part 6. Solitude versus loneliness. To fully conquer the modern loneliness epidemic, we must master a critical psychological distinction that many people completely overlook in their daily lives. We live in a hyper-connected culture that systematically treats the state of being alone as an absolute tragedy, a clear sign of social failure, or a proof of personal rejection. Because of this loud societal narrative, we constantly flee from our own company, filling every blank space in our day with digital noise, endless screens, and superficial social interactions just to escape our private thoughts. However, the legendary philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer offered a sharp, timeless perspective on our inability to face ourselves when he noted, "If you are lonely when you are alone, you are in bad company." This uncomfortable insight forces us to realize that true loneliness is not caused by the simple absence of other people, but rather by an inability to tolerate our own internal world. There is a profound, fundamental difference between the state of loneliness and the state of solitude. Loneliness is a painful, anxious, emotional condition characterized by a sense of isolation, inner emptiness, and an intense, desperate craving for external validation to fill a psychological void. It is a form of emotional suffering that happens when we are deeply uncomfortable with our own minds and look to other people to distract us from our core insecurities. Solitude, on the other hand, is a state of peaceful, highly productive isolation. It is an intentional, conscious choice to step away from the loud noise of the world to reflect, recharge, and deepen our self-awareness. Loneliness is a hunger for anyone's presence. Solitude is a feast of your own identity. The major problem arises when we use other human beings as a cheap escape from our own internal chaos. If you enter romantic partnerships, friendships, or social circles out of a desperate, paralyzing fear of being alone, you will always project your deepest anxieties onto the people around you. You become clingy, excessively demanding, and constantly insecure, endlessly seeking verbal reassurance that you are worthy of love and attention. This toxic level of dependency inevitably suffocates the relationship, pushing stable people away and reinforcing the exact cycle of loneliness you were trying to escape in the first place. You can never build a healthy, balanced connection with another person if you possess a broken relationship with yourself. Learning to transform your loneliness into peaceful solitude is one of the most liberating, transformative skills you can ever develop as an adult. It requires you to sit quietly in a room with your thoughts without reaching for your phone to numb the silence. It means learning to appreciate your own mind, deeply understanding your core values, and processing your difficult emotions instead of running away from them through mindless socialization. When you become completely comfortable in your own skin, you no longer approach human relationships from a position of desperation. You stop looking for people to save you from your emptiness and start looking for people to share a beautiful life with, completely changing the dynamic of your connections. Part 7. The practical path out of isolation. Having traveled deeply through the psychological complexities of the modern loneliness epidemic, the ultimate question we must confront is a practical one. How do we actually fix this in our day-to-day lives? We cannot simply sit back, adopt a passive mindset, and hope that a group of perfect, deeply understanding friends will suddenly knock on our front door to rescue us from our isolation. True social connection requires proactive, disciplined execution and a willingness to step into the discomfort of the real world. To solidify our strategy and move forward with absolute clarity, we must embrace a final grounding truth about human relationships. The cure for loneliness is not more people, it is deeper connection. This means that expanding the raw size of your social circle or accumulating hundreds of casual acquaintances is completely useless if you do not actively increase the emotional depth of the bonds you already possess. The first practical step on this journey is to perform a radical audit of your current social ecosystem. Look closely at the people you spend your time with and ask yourself if those relationships are based on mutual growth, shared values, and genuine support, or if they exist out of simple convenience and shared distractions. Are you maintaining certain friendships out of sheer habit, even though those interactions consistently leave you feeling drained, superficial, and fundamentally misunderstood? If so, it is time to pivot your focus entirely. Direct your limited emotional energy toward the individuals who show a genuine, active interest in your well-being, the ones who listen as much as they speak, and the ones who challenge you to grow. Prioritize the few who truly matter over the massive crowd that does not. The second step is to actively lower the barrier to entry for new connections by embedding yourself in physical environments that naturally foster shared values and mutual interests. Instead of trying to meet people in chaotic, surface-level environments, place yourself in spaces where meaningful conversations can occur organically. Join a local running club, attend a weekly professional workshop, learn a new skill in a creative class, or participate in a consistent volunteering group. When you position yourself in spaces where human beings are gathered around a common purpose, the initial friction of starting a conversation drops significantly. You do not have to perform, pretend, or try to impress anyone. You simply have to show up, be fully present, and let the shared experience initiate the bond naturally. Finally, you must remember that building relational fitness is a long-form journey of compounding returns that requires immense patience. Do not get discouraged if your first attempts at showing vulnerability feel slightly awkward, or if a potential friend does not immediately text you back. Keep showing up for yourself and for others with absolute consistency, applying the core philosophy of everyday better you to your daily human interactions. Make that quick phone call, send that supportive text, and dare to be the first person to ask a meaningful, open-ended question. By taking control of your social health one small, intentional step at a time, you will inevitably dissolve the walls of your isolation and build a life rich in authentic, enduring human connection. We have traveled together through the deep anatomy of the modern loneliness epidemic, tracing its roots from massive societal shifts down to our most private daily habits. We have discovered that genuine human connection is not an accident of fate or a stroke of good luck, but a psychological muscle that demands regular, disciplined training. True maturity means completely rejecting the illusion of hyper-independence, stepping past the comfort of superficial social interactions, and daring to bring authentic vulnerability into our daily conversations. As we bring this episode of Everyday Better You to a close, my challenge to you today is incredibly simple and intensely practical. Do not let this audio track just be another piece of intellectual information you consume and immediately forget. Pick up your phone right now, select one friend you have not spoken to in a while, and send them a brief, genuine note checking in on their life. No grand gestures, no complicated logistics, just a small 1% act of intentional consistency to keep the bond alive. Thank you for investing your valuable time with me today. Keep refining your focus, protect your social health, and I will see you in our next episode as we continue to grow step by step every single day.